Nothing in the Lou Brydges Show is intended to be legal analysis, legal advice, or legal recommendations that would be applicable to your particular situation. Everyone in foreclosure or underwater with their mortgage are encouraged to seek legal counsel for a review of your specific situation. Welcome to the weekly broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history that created it. Are you in foreclosure, at risk of foreclosure, or underwater with your mortgage? Do you know someone who is? Every week on this show, you'll get real answers from a real attorney. Lou Brydges will explain options in the foreclosure process and talk about defective mortgages, mortgage restructuring, loan modification, short sale negotiation, and discuss what to look for when choosing a foreclosure defense attorney. Lou is an experienced foreclosure defense lawyer on the front lines of mortgage defense and litigation. Lou is dedicated to helping you keep your property. And now, it's time for the Lou Brydges Show and the truth about foreclosure. Here's your host, Lou Brydges.
Good morning, Chicagoland listeners. This is the Lou Brydges Show, and thank you for joining us. Another beautiful Saturday morning here, and we're very pleased to be back for the third segment of the Lou Brydges Show. And the response so far, I want to thank everyone. The response has been overwhelming. The ratings, I mean, this is just far exceeding our wildest expectations. But, you know, to be honest with you, as I must always be, I kind of had a feeling. I just had a premonition, if you will, or a feeling that the show would catch on, and not nearly as quickly as it has. But because the reason is what we're doing is very simply spreading the truth. There's a lot of lies out there. There's a lot of false presumptions and everything, and these need to be corrected. And that's the purpose of this show, is to spread the truth, because the truth is something that we need to address. And we can't start reaching the solutions until we understand the problems. And as we start out every show, I'm going to start out the show with the quote from Thomas Jefferson in 1802, over 250 years ago. Thomas Jefferson wrote, quote, "In light of the current financial crisis, I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and the corporations that will grow up around the banks will deprive the people of all their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their forefathers conquered." Well, that certainly, if you follow the news, is what appears to be happening today, and that's one of the reasons we take on this show, because we're going to try to do what we can to stop it. Because the major banks, and I'm not talking about your local neighborhood banks, they were squeezed out. They're behind this. It's the major big banks, the 12 major big banks and their sort of cousins, the investment bankers on Wall Street, that are taking over the country. And if you follow the news, there can be no doubt of this. And there can be no doubt that they are engaged in mass crime. They become the organized crime figures in today's society. And well, all you need to do is look at the news reports. Just in this past week, New York getting ready to prosecute banks for violations of the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement they reached over past violations in the foreclosure field. And this is not abuses in the foreclosure field. That's one truth that we need to set forth more accurately. Frauds upon the courts of our land at a mass organized scale. And we're starting to get whistleblowers now. There were 2 whistleblowers that have come out in the past month in which they describe warehouses where they send the documents that they feel are ready for foreclosure, and they're missing documents, or they've got they never got an assignment of the mortgage, or the mortgage was sold to 2 or 3 different trusts and that needs to be cleared up, or they're not the servicer, or there's missing endorsements on the note, which means that they don't own the note. There's all kinds of problems, and they send these documents to what's called, quote, the warehouse. And it comes back, and all the problems have been magically corrected. And this whistleblower works in the warehouse. And they have banks of people there all day long, 3 shifts, forging documents, fabricating documents. These are documents that are going to be used in the courts of our land to foreclose upon people. And they've been caught, and they were fined, and they agreed to stop. They were fined $25 million, and they agreed to start giving people modifications and restructuring of mortgages, and they didn't do it. It's been 2 years now, and there's been some minuscule number of modifications and virtually no restructurings, which is reduction of principal balance is what you really need in most cases. And so they pay $25 billion. Well, when you examine the numbers very closely, we don't have time for that today, but I'll give you some sources later where you can check everything I say. This is akin to catching a bank robber who robbed a bank of $100,000 and fining him $1,000 and making him promise not to do it again. Well, he can be darn sure I won't do that again. I mean, geez, this is just how we find $1,000 again. Who wants that? So, I mean, it's sometimes we do, but there is a growing movement in this country. New York is prosecuting, Eric Schneiderman in New York is prosecuting the violations. The Attorney General of our state here in Illinois received $3.3 million, and she sent the money to the county recorders. This is from the robo-signing settlement. And I got to commend Ms. Madigan, because this is, she's onto this. I would like her to be onto it more, but I know she's got a lot of responsibilities being the Attorney General of Illinois with all the politicians we have history of in Illinois, but she certainly is onto this, and I commend her for that, and we all should, regardless of party. And that's another point I want to bring up. This is a bipartisan issue. The thing about this issue about the banks taking over and the recognition that the right and the left are totally aligned on this, and the center too. And which is why it's an issue that, it's my issue. But I think I'm privileged to have this issue, because this is, I think the right and the left finding that they're in total alignment, total agreement on this issue of these major banks being given too much power and taking over branches of the government like the Fed and the OCC. The right and the left may find that there's actually a lot of other issues that they're pretty much aligned on, and they have a lot of other things in common that maybe they don't realize. Because when you come down to it, yeah, there's a lot of debate. There's passionate debate. There's a raucous, messy democracy. But this is what the forefathers, I believe, envisioned. A mature democracy in which there are a very variety of interests that are very passionate about their positions, and they are, I think maybe the forefathers envisioned a little more polite discourse and maybe a more educated discourse. But democracy is not neat or clean. I mean, Winston Churchill once said, democracy is a raucous, free-for-all, messy, nasty form of government. It is perhaps the worst form of government one ever might envision, until one compares it to all the other forms of government, in which case it comes out to be the best. So, but I'm falling behind schedule here. Foreclosure auctions are on the rise in Cook County, and I'll talk about Cook County. The Cook County, what they call foreclosure mill attorneys. They have a great influence, let me put it that way. And in my view, there needs to be a more, I'm not going to say anything more about this, but the foreclosure mill attorneys, they should be finding out about this. I mean, when you're an attorney, you have a duty to investigate. And when your client sends you a note of mortgage signed over to Countrywide, and there's one of the big banks, then you ought to ask them, why? Don't you have an assignment? Don't you have an endorsement of the note? And but they don't. And oftentimes, what so frustrates me is that over 90% of these foreclosures are default judgments. People don't understand that you can defend a foreclosure. Any mortgage that was originated between 1998 and 2008, the so-called securitization era, is probably flawed. And I'm not talking about technicalities. I'm talking about laws and rules and regulations. And it occurred to me, you could call these issues mere technicalities that I'm raising, to be obstreperous or whatever. But these technicalities came into being for a reason, over hundreds of years. It came into being, these technicalities and these rules and conventions and regulations and laws, like the statute of frauds and codified in the Illinois Conveyances Act, they came into being over hundreds of years for very good reasons, to avoid precisely what has occurred and what is occurring today as a result of not adhering to these conventions, laws, rules regarding real estate. Real estate is special. Actually, more accurately, to avoid repeating the mistakes and injustices that occurred in the past that led to the adoption of these rules, laws, and regulations in the first place. The law should be based on the truth, and courts and the justice system should minister based on the truth, without any predisposition about who was wrong or who was right. Because I'll tell you, This situation did not come about because 20 million Americans woke up one morning between 1998 and 2008 and decided to commit bank fraud that day. But 20 million Americans were the victim of the greatest financial crime spree in history, perpetrated by the Wall Street investment banks and the major banks that services mortgages, who were bundling and packaging mortgages and selling them to the investors, largely public employee pension funds, who were protected, thankfully, by the credit default swaps, derivatives, and the government guarantees. But the key thing is, the homeowner was the victim, and the homeowner's underwater, not because he did anything wrong, or not because there was some downturn in the real estate market that could have been expected. There was a correction in the real estate market. So I've gone through my entire first segment with that little rant, but it's important that we clear up some of these lies, and we'll come back and we'll finish up covering the news report. Stick with us. This is the Lou Brydges Show. I've got Mike May, my sidekick here, my loyal producer, Debbie Schreiner, who is she's just so pleased about the show being so successful. She has visions of us going nationwide. Anyway, the Lou Brydges Show will be back in a minute.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Well, back. Good morning again. This is Lou Brydges back for our second segment here. You know, I was talking in the first segment, trying to put things in a big perspective, because the perspective is really big. What we're going through now is of major historical significance. What's going on here? I mean, this is a big turning point in our history of our little experiment here in democracy that we undertook 2.5 centuries ago, because this involves, there has been the greatest transfer of wealth in human history, some are saying, in the past 10 to 20 years, to a very, very small few number of people. And, what's going on in the courts today with all the revelations coming about of the fraud and the abuses in the foreclosure process and all the foreclosure mills and how they've just been processing foreclosures like sausages and committing so many wrongful. The estimates by their own internal, supposed independent, but was actually by their own auditors, investigation that the major banks, which are servicers of the mortgages, undertook 2 years ago after doing 250,000 of the 1.5 million that they were supposed to review. Their own independent in-house review, not in-house, but their outside auditing firms to whom they pay billions of dollars, found between 30 and 80%, depending on the servicer, of the foreclosures that servicer had accomplished had been based on some either robo-signed or fraudulent document or forged document or improper document, or they didn't have the proper standing, or they didn't, some defect in the foreclosure should not have been granted by the courts. And the courts are starting to recognize this around the country. And this will be studied in law schools for hundreds of years. And what's occurring in the courts in our country I have a feeling, will be studied in law school buildings named after people like Eric Schneiderman, and they'll be studying the cases of some of the judges that got it and put a stop to it, and some of those who didn't and who were complicit in this. And I'm not going to name any names, and I'm not going to say that's happening here in Illinois, but there is certainly as in always the case, there are those who get onto it early. The truth is something that is always ridiculed at first. I mean, there's this quote, I should bring it in, but the truth is ridiculed at first, and then it's, criticized, and then ultimately it's accepted as common knowledge. And we're just beyond the ridicule stage. But we have also, let's see, some more news. Foreclosure crisis still has millions in its grip. There are still estimated 20 million Americans underwater. Now, I want to talk about this underwater. You see, if you're underwater by $50,000 or $100,000 in your mortgage, well, generally, very broad brush rule of thumb is that you pay 3 times the amount of a mortgage over the life of the mortgage. So if you're $100,000 underwater, you're paying $300,000 more than you should, which is about over 360 payments, almost $1,000 per month. Now, that $1,000 per month, I don't know about your family, but when you're talking about taking a summer vacation with the kids, or buying hockey equipment for the one who's into hockey, or giving piano lessons to the one who's like son or daughter who's into piano, or whatever, but you're paying $1,000 too much on a mortgage and you're getting nothing for it. I mean, you're not going to have equity in this property for 25 years if you're underwater that much. And you're paying the taxes, the property taxes on a piece of property that you really have no ownership interest in, and you're not going to for 25 years. So what do you do if you're underwater? Well, we do a lot of different things. Our approach is a broad front approach, and every situation is different. But one of the things you can do is apply for a restructuring. Well, if you're current on the mortgage, you can't get a restructuring. So there is the option of a strategic default, which is very, very common in the commercial real estate field. I mean, if you're paying more than the property is worth in your business, you stop paying. And you say, look, we either renegotiate the mortgage or you can have the property. Well, in the residential, because of all the consumer laws and protections and that were violated by the bank, by the originators, instigated by those who were bundling and packaging the mortgages. The originators committed such broad, I mean, we have these reviews of the origination of the mortgage, and we get pages and pages of laws and regulations that were violated. Which means as attorneys that it's not just so simple, that there's a mortgage, the note wasn't paid, and therefore you lose the house. No. There is other affirmative matter. There were other legal issues. This note and mortgage was procured by unlawful means. And it needs to be reformed. And one of the unlawful means is the way the appraisal was conducted. The appraisal was not conducted in accordance with the federal regulations regarding how appraisals are supposed to be conducted, must be conducted, for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac mortgages. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you had signed a note for $250,000 if you had seen an appraisal that said the house was only worth $150,000, which is probably what it's worth. You see, by manipulating the originators and the appraisals and getting people to sign a note and mortgage for as much as possible, the originators were given tremendous commissions by the Wall Street investment banks that were bundling and packaging those. And if you could sell 2,500 mortgages in a typical mortgage-backed security pool, 2,500 mortgages at $200,000 comes to $500 million. And you get a 1% commission, $5 million. And you put together 3 or 4 of those a day if you're on Wall Street. And you have originators all over the country. But 2,500 mortgages at $300,000 is $750 million. $2.5 million more, $7.5 million. And if you're putting together 4 or 5 of those today, well, you just made $10 million more a day. That's $50 million more this week. So there's a lot of incentive, and you have to give the originators incentive. Do anything to get that homeowner's signature on a note and mortgage for as much as possible. And if the appraiser won't give you an appraisal that says the house is worth $300,000, then get yourself another appraiser. And that's what they did. But that is a violation of laws and regulations. So this situation did not come. There were a few people that were taking advantage. Yeah, there's a few, maybe 20,000. But there's 56 million residential mortgages in this country. And, because there was maybe a few liar loans here and there. But, don't you think if those were let go by the banks? Because, okay, we don't care. I mean, it's the originators. It's a note and mortgage. It's going to be sold. It's not our money that we loaned. They have systems set up. But the vast majority of you out there, the homeowners with a couple of kids that want to have a house in a nice neighborhood where there's a good school district and whatever, they overpaid. They were given a 0% mortgage with the promise that don't worry, in 2 years when the interest rate kicks in, we'll get you another 0% mortgage. Because the value of the house is going up so much, 10% a year, that in 2 years you'll walk out of that closing with some cash in your pocket. But that is a violation of law to make that promise. You can't deliver. It's a Ponzi scheme that eventually is going to fall apart. And on Wall Street, they knew that it was going to fall apart. But you see, on Wall Street, when you can see the future, you can really make money. And that's The Big Short. And everyone should read the book by Michael Lewis, because this was an intentional bubble that was created by Wall Street. But it was all dependent on doing whatever necessary to get the homeowner's signature on a note and mortgage for as much as possible without regard to what the property was truly worth or whether the homeowner would eventually be able to pay the mortgage. And that's where we can assert some defenses. And when we assert defenses, we're not going to say you're going to get your house free and clear of mortgage. No, that wouldn't be right either. But we want a mortgage based on the truth. And the truth is this is a $150,000 house. And the truth is the homeowner could afford to pay $150,000. And the truth is that if the mortgage foreclosure goes through and the bank takes over the house, it's not going to sell for more than $150,000. In fact, being a vacant house, it's probably going to sell for a lot less. So the truth is, these 20 million Americans are underwater. They need to be represented by competent counsel who can negotiate from a position of strength by raising the defenses and negotiate a restructuring of the mortgage to get them a mortgage that matches the true value of the house. And you know what? The owner of the mortgage, the true owner of the mortgage, that's what they would want too, if they only knew. But the banks are servicers. People need to understand. Banks don't loan their own money. They loan other people's money. In the case of mortgage-backed securities, they loan the investors' money, but they keep the servicing. And these major banks make as much as 30 times more servicing a mortgage in foreclosure than they do servicing a performing note in mortgage. That is why all the government efforts to modify mortgages have been sabotaged and stymied by the servicing banks. And that is why the servicing banks have sandbagged so many people, telling them, well, you have this application for mortgage modification pending. Don't worry about that foreclosure lawsuit that our foreclosure mill attorneys filed. And that is wrong. And that's what we're out to correct. I'm Lou Brydges. This is the Lou Brydges Show. We're going to talk in the coming segments a little more about what options you might have as a homeowner if you're underwater or facing foreclosure or you need some legal advice, and how to hire a foreclosure defense attorney, what to look for, because there are scam artists out there. I'm Lou Brydges. Join us. Stay with us.
Louis Brydges of the law firm Brydges & O & Associates, one of the leading foreclosure defense firms in the Chicago area, rejoins you now on the Lou Brydges Show. Here's Lou on how you might avoid foreclosure and deal with a mortgage that's underwater.
Hi, hello, listeners. Again, I'm back. In the last segment, I was talking about this historical magnitude, significance of what's going on today, and not just in not just in this issue about the banks taking over, but that's my issue, and that's my arena, and that's where I fight. Everybody tries to do their part where they can and how they can, and I think it's ironic. I look back, and my whole life has been leading up to this. Really, I mean, I studied. It was a big study of the philosopher Jonathan Locke, as was Thomas Jefferson, another one of my heroes. And our country was founded on the principles of that there's a natural order of things. There is a law of nature, and Thomas Jefferson alluded to this in the opening phrases of what I think is one of the most beautiful documents ever written. He said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." That is self-evident is an allusion, a reference to Jonathan Locke that. That there's a law of nature. There are certain truths, transcendent truths, light. It's just the way it is. And that all are created equal, and all are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, liberty and the land, Jonathan Locke philosophized, are inextricably bound. With liberty comes land, with land comes liberty. So with the banks taking the land, as Thomas Jefferson warned they would, and keep in mind, this was not a prediction, it was a prophecy, it was a warning. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of currency, and they control the Fed, and they control the Office of Controller of the Currency, and anyone who doubts that needs only to see, to study that situation that occurred a couple of weeks ago in which the representative of the Office of Controller of the Currency refused to turn over to a U.S. senator, a representative of the people, the results of this the detailed results of this independent foreclosure review, where it was found by their own auditing firms, despite all their efforts to whitewash the independent foreclosure review, we found out that there was mass fraud on a systemic, planned, intentional basis. Now, you can have these top-level executives say, well, we had some overzealous underlings that were doing this. No. You don't have warehouses full of people that require funding and education and housing and phones and everything. No. This is known at the top. And taking the land is taking away the people's liberty. So this is a fight that you need to join in. If we've come too far to not put up this fight. I mean, we have in the past we've sacrificed too much, And we have highly resolved in the past that these sacrifices shall not have been in vain, but that we will take from the sacrifices of others in the fast renewed dedication that this government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth, and we're not going to give it away to these big banks. So, what does everyone do? Well, one of the things you can do is contest. If you're underwater and you're depriving your family of the summer trip or whatever, look for an attorney who understands it. Look for an attorney who's going to talk about their own in review of the origination of the mortgage. It's called an audit or an investigation by an experienced mortgage industry specialist who are out there. And you can find them on the website. Some of the websites, stopforeclosurefraud.com, Living Lies. And Professor Adam Levitin of Georgetown University is emerged as one of the leading academic authorities in this field. And this investigation provides the factual basis for an experienced litigation attorney to do what are called pleadings, complete what are called affirmative defenses, maybe a counterclaim against the bank for violation of the Consumer Fraud Act, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, and the Fair Debt Credit Reporting Act. But do something to fight the foreclosure. And then, we in our firm, what we do is we have people that, we have lawyers that fight the foreclosure. We've got people that pursue that know all about all the different modification programs that may be available by the government programs or private bank or the particular servicer programs. And we insist on, the information. A qualified written request is a minimal requirement. Pursue all the modification programs with the caveat that I want modification with a restructuring if you're underwater. And you get in a situation where you're defending the foreclosure lawsuit, paying a modest monthly fee for that, and with the bank, when they want to modify and reduce the mortgage, and hey, you've got the applications pending. But in the meantime, we're not going to just give away the land. And 90% of the foreclosures that are accomplished in our courts are defaults. Is the homeowners don't fight. And if 10% of these people started fighting, well, you know what? The courts are already inundated, and it already takes a long time. But everybody needs to fight. You just can't sit back and take it. You have to stand up for your rights. Freedom doesn't come free. You got to stand up and fight. And you need to do it effectively. And you need to educate yourself. And you need to go. In the next segment, I'm going to talk about some of the places, some of the websites you can go to where this is being discussed, some of the other people that are involved in this. But stick with us, because this is important. It may not affect you, but you may know somebody. And we the people need to do this. I'm Lou Brydges. This is the Lou Brydges Show. We'll be back in a few minutes here after some news and weather. Stick with us.
We now return to the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history. Here's Lou Brydges, an attorney on the front lines of the ongoing battle for our land.
In the last segment, I promised that I'd give you some of my sources and make some acknowledgments of the people, because this is really kind of, I'm really enjoying this. This is part of a nationwide movement that's growing slowly but surely. I've been a part of it now for about 4.5 years, and, there were some very trying times, but things are starting to catch hold now, and there's some real leaders in this. And, of course, Neil Garfeld. I can't go with the show without mentioning Neil Garfeld, who's the grandfather of foreclosure defense attorneys, Jeff Barnes, his sidekick. Max Gardner's done some outstanding work in this field. Of course, Adam Levitin, the professor at Georgetown University, who testified before the Financial Crisis Investigation Commission for 2 days, and whose legal findings in the 666-page report that they issued, the legal findings consisted of about 200 pages. They just put Adam Levitin's testimony in there verbatim. And of course, Eric Snyderman in New York, and, I know some of the conservative listeners in our audience won't like this, but Elizabeth Warren's on the cutting edge of this, and, the governor in Iowa, his name escapes me, and Kamala Harris out in California. Gretchen Morgensen should get, the New York Times should get a Pulitzer Prize for her coverage. Jeff Sorkin, the New York Times is covering this, and there's law review articles. The law students around the country are writing law review articles, and all of them are just eviscerated. The whole MERS concept was basically eviscerated by a University of Cincinnati Law School review article that came out a couple years ago. And it just, 10 ways from Sunday, when this whole mortgage electronic registration system, 300 years ago, we adopted what was called the statute of frauds in England, it really wasn't a statute, it was a common law. Conveyances of real estate have to be in writing in recordable form. And that's very important because they don't have the assignments of the mortgage, because the mortgages weren't assigned. They weren't securitized properly. And the servicer doesn't care because they're just foreclosing and they're keeping the money. When there was a default, either the private mortgage insurance or the credit default swap paid to the investor, which begs the question about whether there really has been a default that would lead to a foreclosure. And there's a lot of academic authorities that are examining that now. But the point is that this is very exciting in this field. But the problem is that it doesn't matter so much if only, 2 or 3% of the, homeowners fight the foreclosure. Because, again, it all comes down to a lack of knowledge, a lack of this dissemination, the spreading of the truth. And that's why we took on this show, because there are others out there, that we need to spread the truth. Because once the American people wake up, I'm a big student of history, and, Charles de Gaulle remarked on the morning of December 8th, 1941, he said, well, we know what the outcome's going to be now. And because once you wake up the American people and get them, on board of something, well, then there's going to be no stopping. And it's very important because, again, this is the issue. This is the land, and the land equals liberty. We lose our land, and we lose our liberty. And these major banks, just as Thomas Jefferson prophesied, if we let them, take over and control the issue of the currency. And when you create this bubble, and you create essentially by artificially inflating the value of the price, not the value, the price of American real estate by 131% from 1998 to 2008. You multiply that times the 56 million American residential mortgages in the country, and you're creating something like $5.5 trillion of illusory capital that doesn't really exist, but can be bundled and packaged and sold for real cash to investors, public employee retirement funds, and the like. And that $5.5 trillion doesn't exist, but you got homeowners signed on the hook for it, even though the home isn't worth that. So the American home owner, signed up based on frauds and misleading and deceptive practices, signed up to pay $5.5 trillion based on houses that aren't worth $5.5 trillion. And that is caused the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. And that is why will be studied for hundreds of years. And we're in the midst of it now. And that's why it's a turning point. And that's why we took on this show. We got plenty of business. We can always handle more, but, the truth needs to be spread because this is bigger than just, this is very big. This is the biggest thing I've ever been involved in. Now, the forecast for the future depends on the people. And, because if the people start demanding that the judiciary resolve cases based on the truth and the facts of the case, these little technicalities that I've been talking about that aren't really so little, that evolved for very specific reasons over the years to avoid precisely the situation we're in now, or again, more accurately, to avoid repeating the injustices that occurred in the past that are occurring again now because of failure to adhere to these technicalities and injustices, because the truth is the homeowner wasn't to blame. And the homeowner is the victim. And the people in our community, that house, if it's foreclosed on, isn't going to sell for any more than $150,000. It's going to sell for a lot less. So the owner of the mortgage and the homeowner were both aligned in wanting a restructuring. Make the mortgage $145,000. The homeowner will have $5,000 of equity in the property, and you can be damn sure he's not going to miss a payment then. But when you have a $250,000 mortgage on a house worth $150,000, why should you pay it? You're not going to have any ownership interest for 25 years in the property. You're overpaying by $1,000 a month, and you're paying the taxes. You're probably overpaying you shouldn't be paying the taxes. You could rent the damn thing. It's a $150,000 house. But it's your home. It's not something to be played with. And that's why this has also been called the Battle of Evermore. Because it's the same battle that my ancestors fought in England 500 years ago, and the same battle we'll probably be fighting 500 years from now. It's over the land and liberty. Who owns the land? The people that live on it and till the soil and care for it and build the cute little stone fences and whatever, or the bankers, the money-grubbing bankers in London and New York. Well, our land belongs to the people, and we're not going to give it up. So join us. I'm Lou Brydges. We'll be back in a few minutes for a final segment.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Hello, this is Lou Brydges. We're back with the show. You know, we've been talking, this is our final segment today, and so I just kind of want to wrap up and take care of, our website is FightIllinoisForeclosures.com, and the number you can call if you want a free consultation is 224-513-1232. My partner, Scott O., I came across, I saw him in court one day not more than about 6 months ago. And I said, now there's one of the top 2 foreclosure defense attorneys in the state of Illinois. And so I said, I'm going to partner up with him. And we met each other and talked, and it was immediate, it was love at first sight, you might say. But don't tell his wife, because any event, the synopsis of today's show is that you have rights and that you need to stand up if you're a homeowner and you're underwater or you're facing foreclosure, or maybe even the foreclosure lawsuit has gone to judgment. It's not too late to try to vacate a judgment. We always have the appeal process. If the local judges seem stacked against you, you can always appeal. And I'll tell you what, there's a battle playing out in the appellate courts now. And, you've got the first district, which covers Cook County, and then you got the second district, and then we got the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court recently announced some new rules that basically adopted what we've been saying for the last 4 years. They got to show the note. They got to show the mortgage. They got to show the assignment. They got to prove that they own it. And for some reason, that the IMFL, because it's the exclusive procedure for foreclosure, that was somehow interpreted as meaning the IMFL somehow supplanted all the substantive rules regarding litigation pleadings that apply to all causes of action, including actions of the IMFL. So that's going to be interesting to see out, but I think we all know how it's going to, those in the legal field know how it's going to play out. The second district and the Supreme Court are certainly have legal, sound legal. The judges, I really can't comment as a practicing attorney too much on judges. There's rules against that. I do have freedom of speech, but, I do have to watch myself. I, certainly have, the judges are like anybody else. They, they try to do their best, and it's a hard job. And, but again, if it were easy, we could have asked the French to do it. I mean, they are sworn in, and they are sworn in to uphold the justice and to administer justice based on the truth and the rules of pleading and procedure. And for the most part, we haven't got a very good judiciary in Illinois, for the most part. Now, in future shows, there's so much more to talk about, so please join us next week. The Lou Brydges Show, Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. And visit our website, FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. You can check out StopForeclosure.com and Living Lies, the wonderful Neil Garfield weblog. If you have any questions, give us a call at the show here and at this number, and we'll answer your questions. We're not going to take live calls for a while. We may in a few future shows, but you can call in anytime during the week. Leave a voicemail with your question, and we'll review it, and if it's a good question, we'll get to it. If it's not, we won't. So I'm Lou Brydges. Join us next Saturday, and thank you for joining us today. And remember, never give up the land. Fight for truth and justice, and you'll never be alone.
You've been listening to the weekly radio broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show with attorney Louis Brydges, telling the truth about foreclosure. Have you received threats of foreclosure? Are you in a foreclosure right now, seeking a loan modification, considering strategic default, or any other legal action? Know and protect your rights, and do not give up the land. Lou Brydges' passion is to help you keep your home and achieve your legal goals. To receive a free consultation, which may help you decide how to defend against foreclosure, understand your options, and learn what to look for in choosing a foreclosure defense attorney, call 224-513-1231. That's 224-513-1231. or visit FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. That's FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. Get real answers from a real foreclosure defense firm and discover the legal tools at your disposal. Tune into AM 560 The Answer next Saturday morning at 8 for The Lou Bridges Show, telling the truth about foreclosure.